We are not here to be polite. We are here to find the truth. That's what this show is about, truth, even when it burns. George Stephanopoulos muttered those words like a private prayer, seated under the white-hot blaze of the studio lights. Seconds before the red light hit and the cameras rolled, backstage, you could feel it a charge in the air, static crawling through the carpet, making the hair on everyone's arms stand, the kind of electricity that says, someone's about to bleed. Miranda Torres felt it too. She was pacing behind the curtains like a general surveying a battlefield, earpiece jammed in, whispering fast to the floor manager. I want to be clear. Nicolas is not discussing personal history, just the film and the Veterans Project, period. Her tone was crisp, but there was tension under it, the kind of tone that says she's had to repeat this instruction one too many times. Understood, the manager said, but the look he shot at stage left screamed something else entirely. We're not in control anymore, at the center of it all. Nicolas Cage sat perfectly still in his chair, his hands rested lightly on his lap, his fingers occasionally flexing, like they weren't sure whether they belonged on a piano or around someone's throat. His eyes were half-lidded, his breathing slow. But that stillness, that stillness wasn't peace. It was restraint. 5 seconds, someone called out. The countdown struck the air like a whip. George licked the inside of his cheek and fixed his expression into the smile. The same smile he's used for 2 decades. The smile that says, I'm your friend, until I'm not. Free, Miranda stepped closer to the wings, arms crossed. Her phone was already open in her hand. Just in case, too, Nicolas exhaled through his nose and leaned forward. Ever so slightly, the camera snapped to life, and we were live. Good morning, America, George said, his voice smooth as glass. I'm George Stephanopoulos, and sitting with me today someone who truly needs no introduction, Academy Award winner, Hollywood legend, and lightning rod for public speculation, Nicolas Cage. Nicolas turned slightly toward the camera, the edges of his mouth tugging upward in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Pleasure's mine, George, he said. They locked eyes. 2 men smiling at each other across a polished desk, but the tension between them hummed like live wire. Somewhere in the back, a camera operator muttered under his breath, They're gonna fight. George leaned in. Let's talk about your new movie, but first, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. Had quite a journey in Hollywood. Some would say a roller coaster. Peaks, valleys, marriages, lawsuits, that pyramid you bought. How do you? Miranda's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She turned toward the producer's booth, fire in her eyes. Nicolas didn't move, didn't blink, just kept smiling. Calm, measured. George, he said, voice like the echo. In a canyon, I was under the impression we were discussing my new film and my work with veterans. George's smile grew colder. We'll get to that, he replied, but the audience deserves to know the real you, the full picture. You, mean the full tabloid spread, I mean transparency. Nicolas turned his head slowly to face the camera. Not George, not the studio audience. You, the viewers. Transparency, huh? She said. Gaze hard. George, when was the last time you disclosed how much money you made off the Epstein? Interview. The air dropped out of the room like someone had cracked open the window of an airplane mid-flight. The silence was instant and sharp. George flinched us for a millisecond, but it was there. The twitch of the eye, the swallowing click of a dry throat that has no relevance to. Sure it does, Nicolas said, suddenly animated. If we're playing the what do you owe the public game, let's play it. Right now, behind the cameras, the crew scrambled. One producer waved his hands. Another mouthed cut. At the director, no one moved. Everyone was transfixed, like watching a car about to flip off a bridge and being unable to look away. If you're watching this on YouTube, you already know this is the part people keep rewinding. This moment, right here. So before you keep watching, smash that like, drop a comment, share it with your friends, because this isn't some viral clip, this is a detonation. And you're watching it live. George cleared his throat, still clinging to the rails of the conversation like a drowning man grabbing driftwood. I have documents, he said, pulling out a folder from beneath the desk like a magician unveiling a poisoned trick. Public records, tax filings, evidence. You've spent millions on castles, shrunken heads, a dinosaur skull, which was returned. By the way, Nicholas snapped, the smile gone. I returned it to the Mongolian government. That's not a scandal. That's a receipt. And yet George pressed, eyes glittering. You've owed tens of millions to the IRS, bankruptcy claims, lavish spending. How do you explain that to people who can't even pay rent? Nicholas leaned forward, slowly, like a bomb warming up. I never filed for bankruptcy. That's a lie, not a mistake. You say it again, and your lawyers will be hearing from mine. But the tax liens paid, resolved, handled, years ago. You're digging up skeletons that were buried with interest, George's jaw tightened, because the public deserves answers. About what? Nicholas barked. About where I shop. About my marriage. You want to know who I am, George? Ask me about the veterans I visited, the amputees, the burn victims. Ask me about the thousands I spent to make sure every soldier in that hospital got a gift bag. Or is that not juicy enough for your segment? A stunned hush blanketed the studio. Miranda was whispering no shouting into her headset now. The control booth was a war zone. But George kept pushing forward, oblivious to the growing storm. Isn't it fair, he said, grasping at control, to ask whether those extravagant purchases were responsible? Don't you dare reduce my life to a headline, George. The growl in Nicholas's voice wasn't theatrical. It was personal. I've created jobs, he said, for assistants, for drivers, for gaffers, for lighting teams. When I do a film even, a ridiculous one, it pays mortgages. You think, I say yes to every script because I want another diamond-plated fish tank. I do it so my people can eat. George shifted, sensing the narrative slipping. Then let's talk about some of those films, he said, trying for a smirk. The Wicker Man, Ghost Rider, critics called them career suicide. Were you just cashing checks? Nicholas's head tilted, slow, measured. Did you just insult my work? I'm asking about your artistic vision. No, you're recycling. Snark from bloggers who've never stood under a boom mic in 110-degree heat, trying to bring a character to life. I think the audience can judge that for themselves. Can they? Nicholas snapped. You ever stood on a soundstage, George? Ever lost sleep trying to perfect a scene that got cut in editing because the execs wanted more explosions? No. Then don't lecture me about artistic integrity. George flared his nostrils. Critics and audiences both panned those films, and yet you're quoting bloggers, not scholars, not historians, not actors. You don't care about art. George, you care about ratings? I care about truth. No, you care about drama. You want a meltdown. You want a meme. You brought me here to humiliate me, not to understand me. George leaned forward, his voice raised. Respect is earned, Nicholas. And frankly, some of your behavior, my behavior. That was it. That was the matchstick on gasoline. Nicholas rose from his chair, slow and deliberate. His shadow loomed over George, who shrank slightly without meaning to. Everyone felt it. Everyone saw it. Tell me, George, Nicholas said, voice a deadly whisper. What behavior are you talking about? The behavior where I visit hospitals and don't bring press? The behavior where I take roles to pay off debt instead of hiding behind PR spin? The behavior where I own who I am, scars and all? The silence in the studio was absolute. Not a breath, not a blink. Nothing but the sharp humming whine of a broadcast signal hanging in the air. You don't get to sit there in your cushy chair and judge me, Nicholas continued, stepping forward. You want to talk about erratic behavior? Let's talk about this behavior. You ambushed a guest. You crossed a line. And now you want to play victim, George finally croaked. Maybe you shouldn't do interviews if you can't handle tough questions. Nicholas smiled, and this time it was terrifying. George, he said, I've handled things you couldn't imagine in your worst dreams. You think this is tough? He reached down, pulled off his mic. You're lucky all I'm doing is walking away. And with that he did, straight off the stage, past the lights. Past Miranda, who was already calling the car. Past the chaos, George sat in stunned silence. His notes fluttered to the floor like feathers after a pillow fight. The studio stayed, frozen because nobody, not one person in that building knew how to fix what had just been broken. And this is only the beginning. What no one realized, what not even George Stephanopoulos seemed to fully understand, was that the cameras never stopped rolling. The director had hesitated. His finger hovered over the cut button like a detonator, but froze. Something primal kicked in. This wasn't a train wreck. This was history. The kind you only get to film once. The kind that racks up 30 million views before the second coffee break as Nicolas Cage disappeared into the shadows of the soundstage. His silhouette still sharp in the glare of the overhead rig, you could hear George mutter into his mic, We have legal on standby." Behind the glass of the control booth, a young associate producer named Lexi Palmer mouthed, "Oh my God," and hit record on her iPhone anyway. Everyone was pretending they weren't watching this happen in real time. No one was blinking dot, and then, from stage left, a voice cut through the panic. "You don't get to spin this, George." Miranda Torres, furious, composed, impossibly dangerous. She was already marching toward the desk like a warship. Her heels struck the floor like punctuation. No permission, no protocol, just purpose. She didn't ask to join the interview. She took the damn chair. "Someone get security," George said, gesturing wildly off camera. "Mareed," Miranda replied coldly, micked Nowby, because she knew exactly where the hot spots were. She had planned for this, not this exactly, but something like it. Damage control was her art, and right now, she was holding the brush. "Let me make something very clear," she said, eyes fixed on the lens. "Nicolas Cage came on this show. In good faith, he agreed to promote his film, talk about his charity work, and give your network a ratings bump. You ambushed him with gossip columns and weaponized speculation." George inhaled like he was going to interrupt, but something in Miranda's face stopped him. "You think you're doing journalism," she continued. "You're not Woodward or Bernstein. You're TMZ in a suit." George tried again, but his voice cracked mid-word. Miranda leaned forward, dead calm. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You wanted a viral moment? Congratulations. You got one. But let me ask you something. George, who's your next guest? An Instagram chef? A pop psychologist? You think they're not watching this and asking themselves if it's worth it? If they're next?" A fresh wave of murmurs rippled through the crew. The floor director took off his headset like he couldn't listen anymore. The audio tech glanced over his shoulder at the legal rep, who was now rapidly texting under the table. "I don't need to be a celebrity to understand what just happened," Miranda said. "I need to be a human being." And then she did something no one saw coming. She stood, looked right at the camera, and addressed America directly. "If you're watching at home and you believe interviews should be about truth, not traps, if you think artists deserve respect for their work, and not ambushes disguised as curiosity, then let the network know. Let the sponsors know. Let George know. Because if this is what we're calling journalism now," she looked over her shoulder just long enough to sear it in, "then we all deserve better." Then she turned on her heel and walked off the stage. Radiating George blinked like a man waking up from anesthesia. From the back, a stagehand whispered to his colleague, "Do we just go to weather?" They didn't. They cut to commercial. But it was far, far too late by the time the stop ad hit the screen. Clips of the blowout were already trending on X under the tag #CageRage. Every phone in the studio was buzzing. Backstage, Nicolas was storming down the corridor with his coat halfen, sunglasses clenched in one hand, still breathing like a prizefighter between rounds. Miranda caught up to him just outside the studio. "Lot, you shouldn't have done that," she said. "I should have walked out sooner," he replied. They reached the black Escalade waiting outside, but Nicolas didn't get in. He turned, looked back at the building. "I gave them a chance," he said. "I know. I was polite." "You were," I answered. "I gave them my time," and he took a swing at me. Miranda didn't speak. She just stood there, the city around them suddenly too quiet for Manhattan. "Do we sue?" she asked finally. Nicolas exhaled slowly, then gave her the faintest smirk. "No, we let them air it." He climbed into the SUV. The door slammed shut like punctuation, and as the vehicle pulled away, something strange happened. The crowd outside the studio, which had grown fast, word spreading like gasoline under a match, started to cheer. Not boo, not heckle. They cheered inside the building. George sat in his chair with the same expression he'd worn during the worst moment of the broadcast, the one where his gotcha script had fallen apart, the one where the internet saw him blink, saw the sweat bead on his temple, saw the slow erosion of everything he thought made him untouchable. His earpiece buzzed, the voice of his executive. "Producer came through, George," it said carefully. "We're going to need to talk. Legal's asking if you stuck to the segment brief." "I was the segment brief," George replied, still trying to sound like he believed it. "There was a—" Pause. "No, George," the voice said. "You were the risk." There was a click, then silence. And somewhere miles away Nicolas Cage sat quietly in the back of the SUV, scrolling through his phone. One clip, 10 million views, 30 minutes. He smiled. But there was no triumph. In it, only vindication. The driver glanced at him in the mirror. "Sir, where to?" Nicolas Cage looked up. "Someplace quiet." The driver nodded, turned the corner, and vanished into the city. But the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The elevator doors hissed open with a soft ding that belied the chaos inside the ABC building. The executive floor was usually silent by design cherry wood panels, polished chrome fixtures, bottled stillness. But today, it was humming, phones ringing, legal pacing. A crisis PR consultant snapping a USB into the side of a conference room monitor like a soldier loading ammo down the corridor. Behind a half-closed glass door, George Stephanopoulos was locked in a meeting with the top brass, not a debrief, not a post-mortem. This was a tribunal. His tie was loosened. His voice frayed. "I did my job," he said, his hands opened like he was pleading with ghosts. "I asked tough questions." "That's what I've always done, George," said Lydia Connors, SVP of Programming. "You sandbagged the guest." "It wasn't a sandbag. You didn't even let him talk about the damn film," she snapped, slamming a thick printout onto the desk. 88% of viewer feedback is negative. Sponsors are pulling pre-rolls. Do you understand that? You just lit 5 years of goodwill on fire for a 30-second ego hit. George's mouth tightened. The words forming behind his lips were ones he didn't want to say out loud. Not here, not now, but he couldn't stop them. "I was set up." Lydia blinked. "Excuse me, that whole performance," George hissed. The intensity, the stare, the monologue about artistic integrity. "That wasn't spontaneous. That was an act. Cage came in here planning to blow up." A moment of silence, then someone laughed. Not loud, just a sharp exhale. It was Max Ventura, VP of Digital, the guy who used to run meme accounts before pivoting to media strategy. He was young, dangerous, and right now, he had the attention of the room. "George," Max said, smiling faintly, "do you hear yourself? You ambushed one of the most unpredictable, emotionally transparent actors in Hollywood, and you think he had a plan." George stared at him. Max leaned back in his chair. He walked onto the set holding gasoline and a lighter. He just happened to strike the match. Across the table, a junior exec whispered, "He really said Epstein live." Lydia stood. She picked up her coffee and started toward the door, signaling the meeting was over. "George," she said quietly, "you're off air for the week, maybe longer. Go home, stay off social, do not engage." He opened his mouth to argue, but something in her eyes cut him off. "You're not the story right now," she added. "Don't try to make yourself the victim." And with that, she walked out. The rest followed. George was alone outside the conference room. Someone had scrawled #FreeCage in marker across a whiteboard meant for scheduling. He stared at it for a long time, then he took out his phone. But it was already too late. Across the internet, the confrontation had become legend, not just a trending topic. A phenomenon TikToks reenacting the exchange, teenagers impersonating Cage's deadpan fury, while their friends in suits fumbled George's lines, podcasters analyzing every facial tick. Twitter threads decoding body language. Notice when Cage's left eye twitches, this is the moment he knows George has nothing real. Reddit was worse. George stepped in the cage, read the front page of our public freakouts. But it wasn't just the audience that was reacting, it was the industry. Emails pinged into Miranda's inbox faster than she could respond. Netflix wanted a meeting. HBO asked if Cage would be interested in an unscripted series. A24 had already sent over a revised script for a psychological drama that Nicolas had previously passed on. "We're prepared to meet your full quote," the email said, "and we'll rewrite the character as a version of you." Inside the SUV, Miranda tapped her screen and held out the phone. "Nick, look." He glanced at the screen. A direct message from Robert De Niro. "Saw the interview. Fucking brutal. Let me know if you ever want to team up." Nicolas didn't smile, but but something in his shoulders shifted. "A release. I'm not doing another interview," he said. "You won't have to open." "I'm serious, Miranda. I know." She paused. Double quotes, ... "But would you do a podcast?" He raised an eyebrow. She raised hers back. "I mean one where you ask the questions." The idea sat there between them like a live wire, but neither of them touched it yet, not while the fire was still burning. Later that night, as rain began to splatter across Midtown Manhattan and news outlets scrambled to spin the narrative, a different kind of conversation was happening inside the GMA studio. The cleaning crew had just finished sweeping the stage. The makeup lights were off, but a small group of junior producers' Gen Z interns mostly were gathered near the green room, watching the footage again, all of them silent. No jokes this time, just respect. One of them, a kid named Jordan, turned and asked the others, "Was it just me, or did he actually win that?" No one answered. They didn't have to, because it was obvious, and it wasn't over yet. It started not with a bang, not with shouting, with breaking glass or heated crosstalk, but with a piano, a slow, ambient chord progression, spilling out across the live streams. Intro screen black and white footage of veterans hugging their families, crew members setting up lights. An old behind-the-scenes clip of Nicolas Cage handing out bottled water to a PA in 106-degree heat. No voiceover, no logo, just music and memory. Then the feed cut to a single camera. Locked, one wide shot, a man seated at a table, no host, no interviewer, no studio lights, just Nicolas Cage in a dark t-shirt sitting across from an empty chair. A handheld mic rested on the wood. He didn't look up, not right away. When he did, it wasn't to perform, it was to speak. "I want to talk about what happened." No preamble, no apology, no handlers off screen, just his voice. "I want to talk about what it means to be misunderstood." He folded his hands. The silence was long, purposeful. "A week ago, I was invited onto a morning show to discuss a film I cared deeply about. A film made with a small crew, on a short schedule, funded by people who believed in its message. And more importantly, an initiative we launched to support wounded veterans after the credits rolled." He paused. Instead, I was confronted with a file folder. He leaned forward, voice steady. "And what shocked me most wasn't the questions. I've been asked worse. Hell, I've lived worse. What shocked me was how normal it felt to be ambushed, like it was expected. Like that's just what interviews are now." He looked off camera, the first flicker of emotion. "But I don't think it has to be." He stood up, walked around the table, and that's when the second camera cut in. Clean angle, perfect frame. "This isn't a redemption arc," he said. "This isn't a revenge monologue. I'm not here to get even, because it's not about George Stephanopoulos. It never was." He stopped. "It's about what we call truth." He lifted the mic, carried it with him to a side chair, and sat back down. "You've been lied to. We all have. We've been sold the illusion that confrontation equals honesty, that drama equals transparency, that if we yell loud enough, it must be journalism." The comment section on the stream exploded. "Is this a TED Talk? This is better than therapy. Why do I feel like I'm watching the season finale of a prestige series? Is anyone else crying? No, just me. Cool." Nicholas didn't react, because he wasn't reading them. He was still in it, still bleeding it out. "I've played lunatics, visionaries, broken men, and sometimes people forget that I'm also a human being. That when I walk off a set, I go home with stories I don't always know how to tell." He breathed deep and measured. "And that's what this is. A new kind of story." The camera shifted again. Third angle, a handheld shot soft focus. Like a documentary, I don't have a network. I don't have a cue card. I don't have producers yelling in my ear. He looked up. "I have you." The feed paused for just a heartbeat, then resumed. "And I want to use this space not to answer questions, but to ask them." He turned to the empty chair across from him, because it wasn't empty anymore. Miranda Torres walked into frame.com, grounded. She sat, no makeup, no earpiece, just her and him. He slid the mic across the table, and she picked it up. "What question do you want to ask first?" she said. Nicholas tilted his head. "Why is kindness no longer considered compelling?" She blinked and smiled. A real one. The feed cut to black for a second, then came a hard cut. rapid shots news segments, talking heads, parodies, debate panels, all reacting to last week's meltdown. Cage walks off GMA. Stephanopoulos facing backlash. Was it justified or overblown? What does this mean for morning news? Then back to Cage. Alone again. I don't regret walking out, he said, but I regret that I had to. He looked dead into the camera, because walking away means surrendering the possibility of connection, and we're starving for connection. He stood once more. No more rehearsed takedowns, no more puff pieces, just people. Then, soft and low. So if that's a show you want to watch, he stepped forward. If you believe in real conversations, real stories, and real people, then stay. He placed his hand gently on the lens, and the shot went dark. Then, text on black this fall, Unfiltered with Nicolas Cage premieres worldwide. Because real stories deserve real space. Like, share, subscribe, and stay loud. Fade to silence. The live stream ended, but the impact did not. Hours later, a statement was released by ABC. No direct apology, but an acknowledgement of editorial missteps and a promise to review guest treatment protocols. George Stephanopoulos still off air. Rumors of early retirement swirling like vultures over a dying brand, and Nicolas booked solid. Independent film offers scripted prestige dramas, a 3-picture deal from a streamer that had passed on him last year. But more than that, something else had returned: respect from fans, from fellow artists, from the silent masses tired of watching honesty get turned into clickbait. And somewhere in the city, on a quiet night, Nicolas Cage stood by himself on a balcony, looking out at the skyline. No cameras, no mic, no script, just the man. Still a little unpredictable, still a little misunderstood, but finally heard end. And if this story moved you, shook you, made you think, made you furious, or made you feel, don't just scroll past it. Like it, share it, talk about it. Because in a world full of noise, moments of truth are rare, and they deserve to be seen.